Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to Hatchet. I'm Robert Denny, teacher at Park Jeong English School. We are going to be reading the book Hatchet by Gary Paulson, and I will read along the chapter with you, 6 to 7 pages at a time per video, and we will look at the vocabulary for Hatchet as it applies to my classes. And then we will also take a look at a recap at the end to help better understand the content of the chapters. So our first video for Hatchet here will be chapter 1, pages 1 to 6 from this version of Hatchet. There might be other books with slightly different page numbers, but roughly page 1 to 6. And as we read along, we're going to take a look at some specific vocabulary. So let's get started. Brian Robinson stared out the window of the small plane at the endless green northern wilderness below. It was a small plane, a Cessna 406, a bush plane, and the engine was so loud, so roaring and consuming and loud, that it ruined any chance for conversation. So this is a Cessna 406 airplane in this chapter. Not that he had much to say. He was 13 and the only passenger on the plane was a pilot named, what was it? Jim or Jake or something, who was in his mid-40s and who had been silent as he worked to prepare for takeoff. In fact, since Brian had come to the small airport in Hampton, New York to meet the plane, driven by his mother, the pilot had only spoken 5 words to him. Get in the co-pilot's seat. Yes, we have pilot, co-pilot, pilot, co-pilot. Pilot, a person who drives a flying craft. Co-pilot, a second pilot. Okay, let's continue. Which Brian had done. They had taken off, and that was the last of the conversation. There had been the initial excitement, of course. He had never flown in a single-engine plane before, and to be sitting in the co-pilot's seat with all the controls right there in front of him, all the instruments in his face as the plane clawed for altitude, jerking and sliding on the wind currents as the pilot took off had been interesting and exciting. But in the 5 minutes they had leveled off at 6,000 feet and headed northwest, and from then on, the pilot had been silent, staring out the front, and the drone of the engine had been all that was left. The drone and the sea of green trees that lay before the plane's nose and flowed to the horizon, spread with lakes, swamps, and wandering streams and rivers. So let's look at some of those words. Controls, 동계수단, tools for using a machine or technology. These are the controls for the Cessna airplane. Altitude, 고도, height above sea level. So height above sea level, 고도, altitude. Okay? And horizon, 수평선, the line at which the Earth's surface and the sky appear to meet. This is the horizon. Okay, let's continue. Now Brian sat, looking out the window, with the roar thundering through his ears, and tried to catalog what had led up to his taking this flight. The thinking started. Always it started with a single word, divorce. Divorce, 이혼, the legal dissolution of a marriage by a court. Divorce, 이혼. Let's continue. It was an ugly word, he thought, a tearing, ugly word that meant fights and yelling. Lawyers. God, he thought, how he hated lawyers, who sat with their comfortable smiles and tried to explain to him in legal terms how all that he lived in was coming apart, and the breaking and shattering of all the solid things. His home, his life, all the solid things. Divorce, a breaking word, an ugly breaking word. Divorce, secrets. Okay, so let's look at some vocab. There we have lawyer, 변호사. A lawyer is a person who works in or studies the law. Okay, 변호사. And it appears he does not like them. Okay? Secret, 비밀. Not meant to be known or seen by others. Secret, email. Let's continue. Divorce, secrets. No, not secrets so much as just the secret. What he knew and had not told anybody. What he knew about his mother that had caused the divorce. What he knew. What he knew. The secret. Divorce. The secret. Brian felt his eyes beginning to burn and knew there would be tears. He had cried for a time, but that was gone now. He didn't cry now. Instead, his eyes burned and tears came, the seeping tears that burned, but he didn't cry. He wiped his eyes with a finger and looked at the pilot out of the corner of his eye to make sure he hadn't noticed the burning and tears. The pilot sat large, his hands lightly on the wheel, feet on the rudder pedals. He seemed more a machine than a man, an extension of the plane. On the dashboard in front of him, Brian saw the dials, switches, meters, knobs, levers, cranks, lights, handles. They were wiggling and flickering, all indicating nothing that he understood, and the pilot seemed the same way. Part of the plane, not human. When he saw Brian look at him, the pilot seemed to open up a bit, and he smiled. Okay, so rudder, key. This is used in steering a boat, ship, or aircraft. It goes like this. Steering the boat or airplane. The rudder, key. Okay, part of a complicated system, 복잡한, consisting of many interconnecting parts and intricate, complicated. Rudder. Let's continue. Ever fly in the co-pilot seat before? He leaned over and lifted the headset off his right ear and put it on his temple, yelling to overcome the sound of the engine. Brian shook his head. He had never been in any kind of plane, never seen the cockpit of a plane except in films or television. It was loud and confusing. First time. It's not as complicated as it looks. Good plane like this almost flies itself. The pilot shrugged. Makes my job easy. He took Brian's left arm. Here, put your hands on the controls, your feet in the rudder pedals, and I'll show you what I mean. Brian shook his head. I'd better not. Sure. Try it. Brian reached out and took the wheel in a grip so tight his knuckles were white. He pushed his feet down on the pedals. The plane slewed suddenly to the right. Not so hard. Take her light, take her light. Brian eased off, relaxed his grip. The burning in his eyes was forgotten momentarily as the vibration of the plane came through the wheels and the pedals. It seemed almost alive. See? The pilot let go of his wheel, raised his hands in the air, and took his feet off the pedals to show Brian he was actually flying the plane alone. Simple. Now turn the wheel a little to the right and push on the right rudder pedal a small amount. Brian turned the wheel slightly. and the plane immediately banked to the right. And when he pressed on the right rudder pedal, the nose slid across the horizon to the right. He left off on the pressure and straightened the wheel, and the plane righted itself. Now you can turn. Bring her back to the left a little. Brian turned the wheel left, pushed on the left pedal, and the plane came back around. It's easy, he smiled. At least this part. The pilot nodded. All of flying is easy, just takes learning, like everything else. Like everything else. He took the controls back, then reached up and rubbed his left shoulder. Aches and pains must be getting old. Brian let go of the controls and moved his feet away from the pedal. As the pilot put his hands on the wheel, thank you. But the pilot had put his headset back on, and the gratitude was lost in the engine noise, and things went back to Brian, looking out the window at the ocean of trees and lakes. The burning eyes did not come back, but memories did. Came flooding in. The words. Always the words. Divorce. The secret. Fights. Split. The big split. Brian's father did not understand as Brian did. Knew only that Brian's mother wanted to break the marriage apart. The split had come, and then the divorce. All so fast. And the court had left him with his mother, except for the summers and what the judge called visitation rights. So formal. Brian hated judges as he hated lawyers. Judges that leaned over the bench and asked Brian if he understood where he was to live and why. Judges with the caring look that meant nothing, as lawyers said legal phrases that meant nothing. Okay, so we're talking about courts, Bob 1. And we talked about lawyers earlier. So they are in the court, a tribunal presided over by a judge. Okay, and judge, pansa, a public official appointed to decide cases in the court of law. Brian does not like lawyers, he does not like courts, he does not like judges. Let's continue. In the summer, Brian would live with his father. In the school year, with his mother. That's what the judge said after looking at papers on his desk and listening to the lawyers talk, words. Now the plane lurched slightly to the right, and Brian looked at the pilot. He was rubbing his shoulder again, and there was the sudden smell of body gas in the plane. Brian turned back to avoid embarrassing the pilot, who was obviously in some discomfort, must have stomach troubles. So, this first summer, when he was allowed to have visitation rights with his father, with the divorce only 1 month old, Brian was heading north. His father was a mechanical engineer who had designed or invented a new drill bit for oil drilling, a self-cleaning, self-sharpening bit. He was working in the oil fields of Canada, up on the tree line where the tundra started and the forest ended. Brian was riding up from New York with some drilling equipment. So, Brian's father's mechanical engineer. Mechanical engineer. They research, design, develop, and build mechanical and thermal sensors and devices, including tools, engines, machines. Okay? Engineer for tools, engines, machine. Mechanical engineer. Okay, let's continue. Some drilling equipment. It was lashed down in the rear of the plane next to a fabric bag the pilot had called a survival pack. It had emergency food, supplies in case they had to make an emergency landing. They had to be specially made in the city riding in the bush plane with a pilot named Jim or Jake or something, who had turned out to be an alright guy, letting him fly and all. Okay, so that's where we're going to end for the day. The beginning of Chapter 1 of Hatchet. So let's review our vocabulary one more time. Okay, so a vocabulary for pages 1 to 6. We have Cessna 406. This is small bush plane with twin engines. We have pilot, co-pilot. 조정사, the person who flies or drives a flying craft, and the second pilot. Controls. 동제수단, tools for using the machine or technology. These are the Cessna controls. Altitude, 고도, height above sea level. Okay, this is the altitude. Horizon, 수평선, the line at which the Earth's surface and the sky appear to meet. This is the horizon. Divorce, 이혼, the legal dissolution of a marriage by a court. Lawyer, 변호사, a person who works in or studies law. A secret, 비밀, not meant to be known or seen by others. Secret. Complicated, 복잡한, consisting of many interconnecting parts, intricate. Rudder, key, used in steering a boat, ship, or aircraft. This is the rudder. Court, 법원, a tribunal presided over by the judge. This is a court. The judge, 판사, a public official appointed to decide cases in the court of law. Okay? And mechanical engineer, 기계 engineer, mechanical engineer makes thermal sensors and devices, including tools, engines, and machines. So his dad is engineer. So, Robert's recap, page 1 to 6 of Hatchet. So first, the main character is Brian Robeson. He is 13 years old, and he lives in Hampton, New York. Okay, so this is where Brian Robeson is from. Point number 2, Brian's parents are divorced. Okay, they were married before, but now they live separately. His dad lives in Canada. His mom lives in New York. During the school year, Brian lives with his mother in New York. But during the summer, Brian will live with his dad in Canada. Okay. Brian is going to the airport to fly to Canada. He has to bring special equipment to his dad, who is an engineer. Again, engineers work with math and science and build things like bridges. Okay. Brian is the only person on the small plane, the Cessna we talked about, beside for the pilot who drives the plane using special controls. So it's just Brian and the pilot on the Cessna flying from New York to Canada. Okay, we will finish the rest of lesson 1. Oh, one more thing. Brian has a secret that is bothering him. Okay, so there's a secret that Brian has, and he's very worried about knowing the secret. Okay, so that is it for chapter 1, pages 1 to 6. Our next video will be the rest of chapter 1, I believe pages 7 to 12, where we look at the rest of the introduction to Hatchet by Carrie Paulson. See you next time. Bye.